Good afternoon and welcome to Midday Report here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Cato. European capitals are mulling over whether to ban Russian tourists from entering the bloc, sources have told TVP World. The proposal is part of the European Commission's latest draft sanctions package against Russia for the country's ongoing aggression against Ukraine. We are joined live now by our EU correspondent Angela Skujins from Brussels. Good afternoon, Angela. What more can you tell us about this proposal?
Good afternoon. So sources have told TVP World that sitting at the core of the European Commission's 19th sanctions package against Russia is a ban of issuing tourist visas to Russian nationals. Now, sources have told us that this was a proposal by the EU executive itself and is meant to gather steam among some of the most ardent supporters of Kyiv as that country where there's another year of Russian aggression. This would be a significant move as 500,000 Russian tourist visas were issued last year. This is significantly less than the amount in 2019, roughly totaled to be 4 million. However, it's meant to have a dent on the Russian economy, but would particularly target civilians, which is much different from what we've seen in previous sanctions packages, which have gone after those individuals commandeering Russia's shadow fleet, as well as those responsible for those dual-use technologies.
Angela, can you tell us when we might be able to expect that 19th sanctions package to actually be delivered?
Yes, so it's all up in the air at this point. Reuters news agency was reporting on Monday that the capitals would have it as early as tomorrow, Wednesday, but the European Commission made it pretty clear today on Tuesday that this was not going to happen. We did hear from Poland's Deputy Foreign Minister Ignacy Niemczymski. He confirmed that this delay was occurring only to give the 19th sanctions package more teeth, aiming to hit the Kremlin where it hurts, hopefully to stop that country from its illegal invasion of Ukraine. When we did ask him how this sanctions package would be stronger, this is the rhetoric that we're hearing from a lot of diplomats as well as the European Commission itself. Every time they roll out a sanctions package, he stated that it would include a carve-out aiming to stop certain countries like Hungary and Slovakia from continuing to buy Russian energy. This chimes with what we're hearing from across the Atlantic. US President Donald Trump stated that he would implement sanctions onto Russia only when and if NATO military alliance members stop buying that Russian energy. However, we need to hear and see more from the Commission regarding this formal proposal, as this is a lot of off-the-record chatter emanating from Brussels at this point.
Okay, Angela Skujins, our EU correspondent, reporting from Brussels. Thanks so much. An Italian appeals court has ruled in favor of extradition for Ukrainian citizen Zelenskyy K to Germany, where he is wanted in connection with the 2022 Nord Stream pipeline explosions. The decision was issued on Tuesday by a court in Bologna following Zelenskyy K's arrest near Rimini in August under a European arrest warrant. German prosecutors suspect the 49-year-old of organizing the sabotage of Nord Stream 1 and 2, which carried Russian gas to Germany. Zelenskyy K denies any involvement, saying he was in Ukraine at the time. The Nord Stream blast in September 2022 destroyed 3 of 4 pipelines, with German investigators alleging the attack was carried out using a rented yacht and explosive placed by divers. No state or group has yet claimed responsibility. Norway has launched its largest overseas military mission to date, training Ukrainian armed forces instructors at a classified base in southeastern Poland. Norway has begun Operation Legio, its largest overseas mission at a classified base in southeastern Poland. The training started on Monday and runs through the end of the year. Several hundred Ukrainian soldiers will take courses in leadership, stress resilience, and NATO-supplied weapon systems. The program also tests new battlefield equipment, including unmanned transport vehicles. Led by the Telemark Battalion and Norway's Rapid Response Forces, The training takes place at Camp Jomsborg, a facility built since August to host hundreds of troops. Officials say Poland was chosen after Russian drone threats made training in Ukraine too dangerous. Brigadier Atle Molde, commander of the mission, says the site combines safety with proximity to the front. Instructors from Poland and the Baltic states are expected to join. Oslo has not ruled out extending the mission beyond December. On Tuesday, the 6th accession conference with Albania was held to review the country's progress in establishing key cluster partnerships, marking the opening of Cluster 4. The EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Kos, highlighted that Albania's rapid growth is driven by its government's effective leadership.
Today we will open from 6 clusters, the 5th cluster, on green agenda and sustainable connectivity. This is very important because if we go on with the speed like this, we will be able to open all the clusters in this year. Albania is showing that with strong leadership, the positive change is possible. If they deliver, the European Commission is delivering too and supporting them, and of course everything is on the principle of merit.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has warned that Vladimir Putin is using diplomacy with President Trump to try and break out of international isolation. In an interview for Sky News, Zelenskyy called the Alaska summit a missed opportunity for Ukraine. He said that while Putin gained concessions, the trilateral meeting, including Ukraine, could have produced concrete results. Zelenskyy also accused Putin of trying to trick Trump to do everything in his power to avoid Western sanctions. Zelenskyy said, quote, he should have received a setback in this war and stopped, but instead he received de-isolation. He got the photos with President Trump. A proposed direct meeting between Zelenskyy and Putin has yet to take place. Ukraine's budget will run a €40 billion deficit next year, according to the draft budget presented by the government. This will have to be covered by Kyiv's allies, and the finance ministry says that it's still looking at a €16 billion gap.
Running an existential war is not a cheap business, and it shows in Ukraine's 2026 budget. The country plans to spend almost €100 billion next year, with almost 60% of that amount earmarked for defense.
The lion's share of the budget will be covering the defense and military spending, military expenditures.
The government wants the revenue to go up by almost 1/5, but even with that extra income, the budget shortfall is still going to be significant, more than €40 billion.
The growth in revenues is definitely achievable because while the state budget for 2026, it assumes 2.4% GDP growth in 2026. Second of all, Ukraine is doing a lot of efforts in shadowing the economy, and the 2026 budget includes the revenues from these.
Kyiv is in talks with international partners, but the finance ministry reckons that the unfunded gap for next year is still around €16 billion. But help may be on its way, with media reports about some progress on the frozen Russian assets.
So they found, or they're about to find, a very clever mechanism that will mean that legally speaking, Russian frozen assets will remain in the European Union, but the profits generated by these assets can be transferred to Ukraine now in a way of the so-called reparation loan.
The country needs all the help it can get, with Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal estimating that Ukraine will need at least €100 billion for defense next year, a sum which accounts for weapon systems donated by Kyiv's allies. In total, Ukrainian officials say that the war cost about €150 million a day now.
On Monday evening, the Polish State Protection Service neutralized a drone caught operating over government buildings and the Belvedere Palace in Warsaw. 2 citizens of Belarus were detained in connection with the incident. The police are currently investigating the details and motives behind their actions.
An unusual sighting in Warsaw. On Monday evening, the Polish State Protection Service neutralized a drone operating over some of the most important facilities in the country, government buildings and the Belvedere Palace in Warsaw. Authorities acted fast. 2 people were detained.
The people who operated this drone have been identified. It was a young Belarusian and her 20-something friend from Ukraine. These people were directly detained by the officers of the State Security Service.
Police are now investigating the motives and circumstances. Prime Minister Donald Tusk confirmed the incident on X.
A short while ago, the State Protection Service neutralized a drone operating over government buildings on Parkowa Street and the Belvedere Palace. 2 Belarusian citizens were detained. The police are investigating the circumstances of the incident.
The spokesperson for the Minister of the Interior, Jacek Dobrzyński, praised the swift response and reiterated that there was no imminent threat.
We reject the rumors that this is some mass surveillance action. At this stage, no one is able to say for sure these are young people. Perhaps it resulted from carelessness, perhaps from ignorance, perhaps from the fact that they wanted to make a film here above the Łazienki Park.
The incident comes amid heightened regional tensions. Last week, Poland shot down Russian drones which violated its airspace. Days later, Romania also scrambled its jets to ward off a similar incursion. Meanwhile, Poland has vowed to remain alert. Key government sites remain heavily protected and investigations are ongoing. For TVP World, I'm Diana Skaya.
German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier has said that the issue of World War II reparations is legally closed from Berlin's perspective. Steinmeier's spokesperson revealed on X the details of the president's meeting with his Polish counterpart, Karol Nawrocki. Steinmeier's spokesperson, Kerstin Gamelin, wrote on X that in response to the Polish president's call for reparations, the German head of state stressed that the matter is definitively settled in legal terms. She added that Steinmeier underlined the importance of shared remembrance and commemoration between the 2 countries. The German government has previously voiced the same position. The 2 leaders also discussed Russia's war against Ukraine, agreeing on the need to keep supporting Kyiv and to further strengthen NATO's eastern flank. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says that Russia has attacked his country with more than 3,500 drones and 190 missiles since the start of September. The announcement comes as Russia and Belarus wrap up their joint military exercises close to Poland's border. Meanwhile, analysts have labeled Donald Trump's call for all NATO countries to stop buying Russian oil and gas as an excuse by the US president to avoid hitting Moscow with further sanctions.
Blown to bits in broad daylight, this Russian strike in Kharkiv, close to the front line in northeastern Ukraine, destroyed an educational building, injuring 2 people. Early on Tuesday, Zaporizhia in southeastern Ukraine came under a large-scale air assault. The attacks caused a series of intense fires across the city. The regional governor reported that at least 1 person was killed and more than a dozen injured. There were also strikes in the Sumy region and the capital, Kyiv, where a double-tap strike hit emergency workers fighting a fire caused by an earlier attack. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy detailed the level of attacks his country has suffered.
Since the beginning of September alone, more than 3,500 drones of various types and nearly 190 missiles, along with more than 2,500 aerial bombs, have been launched against our people.
Ukraine's military said it struck Russia's Saratov oil refinery during an overnight attack on Russia's Saratov region. Donald Trump has called for all NATO countries to stop buying Russian oil and gas, but experts suggest the US president can use Turkey, Hungary and Slovakia's interest in maintaining Moscow's energy supplies to sideline the issue of further US sanctions on Russia.
Turkey has no political will to do that, Hungary and Slovakia also, but even if they would have political will, it would take a couple of years. So I read it that President Trump doesn't want to impose new sanctions on Russia.
All of this comes as Russia and Belarus wrap up their Zapad joint military drills. Experts say the exercises will be notable, not for the number of troops involved, but the participation of international observers.
Some of the observers that turned up, notably the American, but also, if I understand correctly, Turkish and Hungarian observers from NATO, plus a number of observers from the rest of the world. Now that, I think, sends a signal which is probably the more lasting effect of these exercises rather than what actually took place.
Some may regard this as another step in Russia's longed-for return to the international arena.
And this wraps up Midday Report here on TVP World. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.